There is an energy crisis developing, particularly on the East Coast. The proposal that we have is to build a plant in Maine that will manufacture about 160,000 barrels a day of low-sulfur fuel. If the people of a community are concerned of the possible harmful or bad aesthetic or social effects of bringing an industry to a town that has large payroll, that is a job for them to handle through their own planning boards and their own zoning boards. Each of us is only our neighbor's keeper to a certain degree. If we get into Searsport, will do our best to make it a better community. We cannot undertake to determine the commercial and social destiny of Searsport. That's for the people of Searsport.
I think you'll find the boys are going to love it. They're brought up on the water, and that's their life, and they stay there as long as they can stand it. I get Bobby here, guys. He got through school, finished up his school year, and he went to, Pratt & Whitney, Connecticut, to work. He stayed just 2 weeks. He was so goddamn homesick at the end of the week he couldn't even eat. He called me up 10 o'clock one night. He said, meet me in Portland, I'm coming home. I'm all through. He said, I can't even eat. And then he went lunch with one of his schoolmates when he bought a 427-foot long boat, started going long. If you want to go to work, you can. If you don't want to go to work, or sit in the house and just forget about it. But he's done all right. A lot of mornings he leaves about anywhere from 5 to half past the morning. He put in his 10 to 12 hours out there. That's their life. They brought up in it and they hang to it. As long as they can catch lobsters, I don't think I'd ever leave it myself.
I never liked the industry too much. But I'd rather work alone than with a group of people. Everybody, I think, always would like to work for himself, be in his own business, and he's his own boss. You can go and come, as you want to. And if you work for industry, you can't work as many hours as you want. People don't earn so much money around here as the people in the city, but probably in value-wise, they have more value. Out in the country, you can, if you want to get off by yourself, you aren't crowded, you don't have to look in your next-door neighbor's yard, which, I think is valued quite a lot. They're going by the amount of money you make. What's good $10,000? You got nothing to spend on. I worked twice in Connecticut. I went the second time to Milford, Connecticut, on the coast. There was an electrical plant that was going to start there, but Edna went with that time. She was the one that didn't like it around here because when she was growing up, of course, they lived poorly. She didn't ever want me to go lobster fishing because, she'd seen the hard times. And just, you just have to try a little harder, that's all. But I see a lot of letters in the papers where people would rather live that way. They'd rather make $4,000 or $5,000 a year and get by on it than have to live with the oil industry. All the fishermen are thinking about the same line. And what's good the money if the land isn't half? If you can't breathe, who wants to roll around a pot of oil? Your spillage is only due to human error, but people is bound to make mistakes. If it lands on the beach, we'll say not only lobsters, but the clams feed on it, and scallops too. It's been down to kill them. We'll say from Port Clyde to Southwest Harbour, there must be 2,000 to 3,000 fishermen in this area that would be affected. But if the lobster falls now, the coast of Maine will just be a recreation area. So why should the town of Searsport control to say that what the rest of us in the state of Maine get live with? If they have an oil spill, it isn't going to be the town of Searsport that's going to be polluted. It's going to be every town along the coast. Of course, I suppose they want the industry, jobs, employment. But I can't see making 600 jobs and taking away 2,000 or 3,000 jobs.
If you spill oil in the bay in Penobscot Bay, you're bound to do some damage. How much is open to question. You have 89 tankers a year going into Searsport today. Now what about those ships? If they spill oil, there is damage. So the argument that you mustn't have a refinery at Sears Island because oil is dangerous to marine organisms falls of its own weight. You have to have oil. You have oil there now. What is important is what you do to prevent oil spills and what you do to clean them up if they occur.
I might say that probably my interest in having an oil refinery come into this area is because I see that there is a need for more and better employment in the area. Having been one of 14 children who came through the Depression, I well remember the many things that I was deprived of in my youth, and seeing so much of this around me, I'm very much conscious of the needs of many of our people.
And damn it all, if you're going to get involved in your communities and you want to see progress and people's living habits improve, you have to get involved. And this is why I stuck my neck out in this thing, pushing to get this industry in here, because our people need it. Up in Bar Harbor and Southwest Harbor and Northeast Harbor, these people have got plenty of dough, and they come into Maine and it's used as a private playground in the summertime. And that's their only concern as long as they have beauty all around them. For a few short months in the summer, we who live here 12 months out of the year have to be concerned with doing the best we can for all of our people all of the time. I've been very much concerned with this, and particularly with housing, naturally because of my profession. And I'm appalled when you have to drive out into the country and see the terrible places that some of our people are living in. It's almost unbelievable that in this day of affluency in America that so many people should be living like this. 31% of the housing in these 4 counties is either dilapidated or deteriorating. Now, doesn't that tell you a story that there very definitely is something wrong with our economy? We have lost industries here. We have a dock. It used to be quite busy. We've lost all of our newsprint paper, which is now being shipped out of Canadian ports. We haven't shipped a potato out of Searsport for over 3 years. So our docks are suffering. We have our longshoremen here are unemployed a good part of the time. The only effect that I can visualize will be a rapid change in this area, the result of having this economic impact. I'm not worried about the disaster that may not happen. We could have a disaster the day after the first tanker arrives. It might not happen in 75 or 100 years. This is unknown. But what we do know is that we can have economic improvement of our area and we can see this environment change. Now we're talking total environment. The way people have to live. Man needs more than just fresh air and clean water. I'd like to see some better housing here for our people and better food.
Change from unemployment relief and food stamps to steady or good incomes from productive labor usually is considered a good change. Now, what will it do to the town? Well, I suppose that people will be building more shops. There'll be a shopping center. There'll be a certain amount of increased commercial activity. There always is. I'm not prepared to say that this is a bad thing.
How come you're for it, Tony?
Yeah.
How come you're industry? As soon as the kids in this state are old enough to go out on their own, they leave the state just like that.
But they come back. They come back.
Oh, everybody says they leave.
Because Maine is really a beautiful state. You've got to admit
If they
that.
come back, why isn't the population going up?
How many of you people here are going to stay in the state?
I'm not.
I'm not.
Oh, I am.
I mean, I'll be coming up for vacation because...
Don't get me wrong, I love Manistee.
My brother comes up from New York, works down there all the time, and he comes up on weekends to go boating and stuff.
Yeah, but we come up if it was just like New York. We live here because it's clean.
But I travel all over, and any place I'd rather stay is right here. I mean, there's nothing for me to do, but at least I can breathe fresh air.
All you people are complaining about pollution. What about if you don't have it here? What about wherever it will go? What about if it goes to a polluted place already? Make it even more.
If the oil import quota is lifted, you'll go to like Massachusetts or Connecticut.
Well,
they ship
okay,
up
then
here.
what about those people? You're gonna have, you gotta sacrifice. You have to.
Yeah, but we've got to prevent it before it happens. Because there's not that much you can
Maine
do after
realizes
it's happened.
that we're unique and we have a chance to prevent it.
New York has it, but there's no way New York can get rid of it.
We can be
The
more
big
selective with
airports.
the industries that come. Everybody wants a clean industry that'll give us jobs.
Yeah, but once Maine gets its foot in the way of industry, with this oil refinery, we bring in more industries and there'll be more money.
And there'll be more pollution. More pollution, too.
I really believe that most of the people are against it.
Except for the
Most of
people
the
that are going to make
people
money.
Yeah, except the people that are going to...
People
The real
that are
estate...
sure they'll make money out of it. The real estate will make money because the people that come from out of state to run the place, well, they'll sell them a few houses.
My father figures 4 years of work in the construction of that thing, you know. That's all he's...
My father says
father
we don't
is a
get
ship
any
pilot.
going.
He's all for it because they'll be bringing ships up. He'll be happy.
See,
My father
that's
says
what I'm talking about.
individual well-being. Right. I mean, that's the way it is.
Money.
Only people
You
who
say
afford
that
was ship
I'd
pilots.
rather earn $6,000 a year in Maine than $10,000 down in New York.
Yes.
Transportation cost is one of the principal elements in the cost of fuel. If you can reduce that transportation cost by making it possible to deliver the raw material for processing at a place where there's deep water, you can use large vessels and reduce the cost per barrel. That's the basic attraction of Searsport.
We see this every day. We don't think much about it. The people that don't see it, but they fall in love with it the minute they see it. It's quieter living, I think. A slower life here than it is in the city. But I think that's what draws everybody back, because everybody that comes here, they just fall in love with it, and they come back again, usually. I had a chance to go away during the war, and I didn't figure that I was any further ahead, because the time you paid your rent, you just well off to home. Everybody else went away, but I stayed here. I just, for general, done a little of everything, and whatever come first to be done, well, I do it, and go do something else. Boys had lobster boats, and they had no place to haul them, and I'd haul them up on the shore there. Well, I went to one meeting, yes. I went, the meeting they had in Darrell, I went to that. Well, they told about how much help was going to be employed by the refinery. Well, I don't know, maybe they are, but I pictured in my mind that after the thing was set up, made, that us little fellows ain't got the brains up here to refine oil. It'd be the high mucky mucks that been through the college part of it would get the jobs. Maybe I'm just foolish, but if they should happen to get a spill of oil, it's going to raise heck with the sea up in California. All them birds come ashore, covered in oil. They get just so much oil on their wings while they can't fly. They die. They tried to get into Portland, you know, and they kicked them out of there. They tried to get into Machias. They didn't get in there. Well, they're trying this. Oh, they get into what if they got money enough to get in. Regardless.
My name is Matt Barrows. I'm editor of the Island Advantages newspaper in Stonington. And I first heard of the Sears Island refinery proposal back in January of 1971 when the story broke in the Bucksport Free Press. Didn't register very deeply at first. Then as more of the details of the monstrosity of the proposal became available, I started doing some very heavy thinking about what this proposal would do to this area of the bay, which I recently become acquainted with in very enchanted and very happy with. I grew up in a small town on the Long Island Sound shore of Connecticut, Clinton, Connecticut. It was a small town, somewhat like the towns here, where people waved to each other in Main Street, and you knew most of the people in town. In the latter part of the 50s, the Connecticut Turnpike, a four-lane expressway, was pushed right through the center of the town. It's just sort of a nightmare vision. Everything seemed to go wrong in the town. All the set ways that had been going on for a century or so were abruptly changed in the space of a very few years. It just became depersonalized, less humanized, homogenized. And as I grew up, I vowed that I never would live in a place like this. I've learned something, what happens to towns, what happens to people when they're complacent, when they aren't aware. And there are people who are complacent around here. They've had this environment, they've had this island the way it is all their lives, and it hasn't changed greatly. It has changed slightly. There are more and more summer people. There's more and more tourism. There's a little bit of homogenizations, but it's still, the change is very slow. It's easy to understand. It's easy to assimilate. The pressure of population and economics is going to force changes on the people here before they're even aware that the changes occurred. But if they can have a little bit of foreknowledge and a little bit of understanding of what's happened to some places, like what happened to me in Clinton, if I can tell them about that so that it won't happen here, I'll have made some real contribution, as I consider it important. Generally, the awareness of this proposal and what it would do to the Bay really started to reach into the people's minds and their hearts, too, for the first time. I kept up the pressure a lot in the paper as the hearings progressed and the more of the details came out of the proposal. I viewed Mr. Skoll as a traditional fat cat, non-thinking, insensitive industrialist who was out to make his buck and step over all the little people in the Bay around here. And I viewed my responsibility as a barrier to Mr. Skoll and his interests in protecting the interests of the people of this Bay.
I'm Bob Young, and I'm a lobster fisherman in this area, the whole up Penobscot Bay, and we own this lobster pound here, and we're retail, wholesale trade, and I went to the oil refinery hearings to oppose it because we feel that it would be detrimental to our livelihood. It would put us right out of business with what it would do. The little lobsters are released by their mother, and they come to the surface, and they have a flotation period of 90 days. And in that 90 days, if they come in contact with oil, it shuts off their air, their oxygen, same thing, and the food supply, and it kills them all. And in a few years, this builds up, and it keeps having spills, continual spills, or one major spill. It would wipe us right out financially. I mean, as far as lobsters go, as far as herring go, they come to the surface. As soon as they break into that oil, that kills them. They fill their gills with it. Mackerel, elwars, salmon, you name it, as far as fish goes, it would be all down. And our clams on the shore, they do the same thing. When the tide comes in over them, they suck this oil right into them and kills them. We had a big clam kill down here from just a small spill over here on the tank farm, Searsport. No, I've got children growing up, and I don't want them to have to live in filth the rest of their life. And if they want to get out the shore and go swimming, I'll jump in and take an oil bath. I don't want to see my wash on the line all covered in soot from an oil refinery. I don't want to breathe the oxide fumes. I'd like to see my kids grow up and have a decent job, but I don't think they need an oil refinery here. They've got plenty of oil here. They always find plenty of oil. They say there's an oil shortage, but just as soon as they get the price up where they want it, they find plenty of oil.
We certainly need to work in the oil refinery. You now see this employment line in Belfast, 800,000 people a week signing up. They're exhausted their unemployment. I've had to go out and get odd jobs, because I'm a longshoreman. I have to get odd jobs to help fill in for what I don't earn on steady work. I've always worked long hours. I always like to have a steady job if I could have it. I like to have a steady job 8 hours a day than do the extra as I wanted to. And I'd be sure of a paycheck. As it is now, you're not sure when you're going to, what size paycheck you're going to get. Our young people's got to go somewhere to work. And there'd be some big, beautiful jobs for them right over there. Good paying jobs to start out with. And some of them think we might dirty the water a little bit, but I don't believe we ever would. But we still have these oil spills already. they wouldn't attempt to bring a boat in here if it wasn't safe. The only oil spill you get, your pipeline might break on the dock, and I think they'll be prepared for that. I don't think it ever change anybody's way of life, deal. And I don't think with the facilities they're going to put in that refinery that they'll have a lot of food or air. The old ones, well, I'll grant you, they did smell. But that would look awful pretty to me, see a refinery over there, and I see that mess of woods is the way it is now.
My name is Donaldson Coombs, and I'm chairman of the Environmental Improvement Commission for the state of Maine. The basic statute under which we operate is one that assumes that the environment in Maine is a desirable environment, and the Commission's responsibility is to protect this. At the same time, of course, the Commission recognizes that we must derive our living from the environment, either directly or indirectly, and this involves commercial and industrial development as well as agriculture, fishing, recreation, and this kind of thing. So we have to try to balance one value against the other. But the presumption is that the environment is one that should be protected, and the burden of proof is on the applicant to show that he will not irreparably damage the environment. We are sometimes accused of having a very strong conservation bias. Well, I don't think that's entirely true. We do have a lot of conservation interests, of course, but on the other hand, and I mean, that's what we're there for. We see very complex problems in trying to improve the income in the state, because economically we're depressed. There's no doubt about that. We're depressed, at least parts of the state are. And we see this as a problem. At the same time, all of us recognize that the state has something that we think is worth a great deal. And we know that if we throw the state open to uncontrolled development, we'll lose the one thing that we have that's valuable. What Maine has is that, in a sense, the 20th century missed us. It passed us by. So we recognize, I think most people in Maine recognize that there's an environment here which allows you to live in a way that you can't live in many other parts of the country. And we think it's worth something. It's hard to document it in terms of dollars, but you can if you want to. Any increase in the amount of industrial development is going to influence the way of life to some extent. It can't avoid it. If you were to place a refinery, a major industrial facility in Penobscot Bay, regardless of how you look at it, you have changed the bay from then on. It will never be the same. Now, you may say this has changed for the better, or you may say it's changed for the worse. It's changed. There's no way around it. And the same thing applies anywhere else in the coast where you put it. One question that you have to answer is this degree of change one that you think, in terms of what you visualize for the state, is the most desirable kind of thing? I don't know how you can weigh these individual opinions. There's us who are supposed to make a decision, finally. That puts a good deal of responsibility on us. We may very well make mistakes. The one thing I would hope is that we at least make a mistake from which we can recover rather than make a mistake from which we cannot recover.
Mr. Chairman, Commission members, my name is Henry Hatch. I live in Islesboro. I was born there and have lived there a greater part of my life. I do not appear here as an expert witness. I don't feel that I'm an expert in anything, but I'm just a concerned citizen. It just happens that my family and myself own Turtle Head. The statement has been made that property values would not be reduced. In fact, they might even be enhanced. Now, if you think you can look out the bedroom window on a warm sunny morning from over in Turtle Head and look across the bay right into the face and eyes of an oil refinery, even if its 300-foot stack is concealed by shrubbery, as we have been told, and if you don't think that has a negative effect on the value of that piece of property, then you're hollering down the wrong rain barrel.
I just wanted to get back and get my fingers into dirt. Grow something, see something alive, see a plant or an animal or a bird. Just be a part of nature for a little while. And if I could earn a living at the same time while doing that, even though it wasn't as good a living, that had more appeal
and rejoining a large company. I did quite a bit of landscaping, some truck gardening, act as caretaker for some of these summer houses. I got the idea of acquiring land. It would be some sort of a legacy to give to our children. We don't seem to have much of anything else to give them. And this seems quite worthwhile. We've known it and grown up with it. And we accept it as is without particular thinking or sometimes even enjoy and appreciate it. We just take it for granted. And the fact that people leave these affluent areas, they give it up and come to Maine, there must be something right here. And to live in this area, you must make some sort of a sacrifice. Whether it's dollars, as in many cases it is, you sacrifice dollars for the privilege of living here. It can be carried to extremes, of course. There's no one easy answer. All news media is full of environmental problems. It's very popular. In fact, many of the people who are concerned now have jumped on the bandwagon because they think it's the popular thing to do. But when the going gets a little bit rough, when it gets down to the point where they've got to actually give up something, many of the people now who are making all the noise are just going to fall by the wayside. But I do think it will continue because it is just so serious. It's got to. The thing that perhaps is most important of all of this is the fact that this is a road of no return. This is a one-way street. If this should succeed, and if at some future time, 5 years, 10 years, some of the people of this area should go up to the oil men, it won't be these gentlemen, they'll be long gone. But some of them will be minding the store, I assume. And if they say, well, this hasn't worked out just the way we figured it might. The rosy glow is sort of worn off. The mirage of utopia for Searsport has never quite developed. It's still a mirage. We can't sort of change their mind. I guess we don't want you fellows around anymore. This isn't the thing that we were led to believe it would be. We'd like to have you move. Now, these fellows are not going to pack up their tinker toys on the first packet and go paddling off merrily into the sunset. They're here and they're going to stay here if they want to get in. This is just the opening wage. This is the foot in the door. And there'll be no chance of change. The coast of Maine as we know it will be gone, and it'll be gone forever. Perhaps I may be permitted to illustrate this last point by telling you a very brief story of an old gentleman who had reached his 90th birthday. He was asked by the local press, as so often happens, to comment on achieving such a venerable station in life. And he said, "Well, Sonny, it ain't the greatest, but on the other hand, it ain't too bad when you consider the alternatives." If I may paraphrase the analogy, I would say that perhaps living on the coast of Maine, as we now know it, ain't the greatest, but on the other hand, it ain't too bad when you consider the alternatives.